Hey guys, tonight we're heading back, way back to a world of icy fjords, salted fish, and wool-lined tunics, stiff with seawater. You're in a Viking fishing village tucked against a rocky coast where longships come and go with all the drama of raid songs and bloody sagas, but not tonight. No, tonight the longships are out of sight, the axes are hung, and you're here to figure out what these fierce Norsemen actually did between all that pillaging and poetic brooding. Here's a hint: they fished. A lot. But don't get too comfortable. The sea's cold, the work's hard, and the smell, well, you'll get used to it. Maybe. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The village is waking slowly as the sun peeks over the jagged mountains. Frost still clings to the grass and the smoke from hearths rises in lazy ribbons. You step out of a thatched roof longhouse, pulling your fur cloak tighter. The cold bites your nose before the wind even starts. The longships are gone today, moored further down the coast, or perhaps already out to sea, with warriors aboard chasing silver fame or vengeance. But here, closer to the land, the oars are different, shorter, simpler. These are rowboats not made for battle, but for cod, herring, and whatever else the sea might offer. You're not raiding today, you're fishing. The village hums with a quiet kind of purpose. Men and women move between sheds and drying racks, some carrying coils of line, others with baskets of yesterday's catch. You hear a sharp bark, probably someone's overly ambitious dog, and the groaning creak of a boat being dragged to shore. An old man waves you over. His name's Eric, and he smells like fish smoke, and possibly very old mead. He grins through a half set of teeth and hands you a net. You'll earn your breakfast, he says, and you're not sure if he's joking. Probably not. You follow him to the water's edge, where a handful of others are already checking nets and sharpening gutting knives. Their fingers are raw and red from the cold. No gloves, just calluses and stubbornness. The boats bob in the shallows, tethered with thick rope and optimism. You're assigned to one that leaks slightly on the left. The others assure you it builds character. You help row. The sea isn't angry today, but it's not exactly friendly either. The waves slap gently against the hull, and your shoulders ache by the time you're past the first bend. A puffin watches you from a rock, blinking with what you swear is judgment. Your boat stops in a shallow bay, and Eric throws a net overboard like it owes him money. The others follow suit. You wait and wait. Fishing is, as it turns out, a lot of waiting. You try not to shift too much. The wood beneath you is damp. Your boots are soaked. Your nose has gone entirely numb, and then tug. The net jerks. Eric whoops. Everyone pulls. You haul up your share of the load, flapping silver-streaked cod and a few angry-looking herring. One eel slithers out and nearly takes someone's hand with it. Eric curses affectionately. The boat rocks as you sort the catch. Some fish go into barrels packed with snow and seaweed. Others are tossed back too small, too strange, or too cursed-looking to deal with today. One has 3 eyes. No one comments. You row back slowly, heavier with fish and muscle soreness. At shore, you drag the barrels up to the rack's giant wooden frames shaped like half-finished fences. Fish are hung by the gills' tails, swinging in the breeze. It smells like, well, everything you'd expect. Historians still argue whether the majority of Viking fish preservation involved drying, smoking, or salting first. The truth, probably all 3. Depending on the weather, the catch, and how close you were to running out of salt. You help string up your catch. The drying process takes days, sometimes weeks, and involves more than a few seagull chases. You're handed a stick to wave threateningly. It works, mostly. Back at the hearth, someone hands you a bowl. Thin fish stew, turnip, a sprig of something green that's either a herb or a dare. You eat anyway. It's hot. It's enough. You sit by the fire belly, full of something vaguely nutritious, boots, steaming near the coals. Outside, the sea keeps rolling, nets keep drying, and somewhere a dog chases a fish head into the snow. You've survived your first Viking fishing day. You'll probably do it again tomorrow. You wake up the next morning with fish scales stuck to your tunic and the not-so-distant sound of someone cursing at a tangled net. It's early. Not sunrise early before sunrise early. The sky is still a pale gray smear over the fjord, and the only real light is from the glowing coals inside the longhouse hearth. You stretch, yawn, and step outside into the cold that immediately regrets letting you go back to sleep. The boats are still on shore. That means it's a net-mending morning, and you're in luck. Today you'll learn the ancient Viking art of untangling a problem made entirely of knots and seaweed. If you're lucky, you'll only lose the feeling in half your fingers. You follow the sound of the voices and find Eric and his crew huddled around a pile of netting that looks like a sea monster took up knitting and gave up halfway. They sit on overturned barrels, fingers moving through loops and strands like spider legs, their hands moving faster than their faces, which remain as still as carved runestones. You take a seat beside them, squinting at the net. You have no idea where to begin. Don't think Eric says without looking up. The net thinks for you. That's not helpful. But eventually, your fingers find a rhythm. Over under tug snip tie check. It's almost meditative once you stop fighting it. The net feels like it's breathing, stretching slightly with every move. You wonder how many fish it's caught, how many it let go. Around you, the conversation drifts. Someone mentions a raid up north that went sideways because the lead warrior forgot to bring extra boots. Another tells a story about a cod so big it swallowed a man's paddle. You're pretty sure it's a joke. Probably. One man pulls a bone from his pocket and starts carving it with a tiny knife. You lean over and see it's a fishhook handmade curved perfectly. You can buy them, he says. But where's the honor in that? He gestures toward his pouch. Made 10 last week. Only lost 8. Historians still debate how often Viking fishermen used bone or metal hooks and how much fishing was done by spear net or trap. The answer, like most Viking things, seems to be yes. Whatever worked, whatever lasted, whatever was nearby and didn't cost you an arm. Eric grumbles as he cuts away a particularly stubborn knot. This one's cursed, he says, spitting in the snow. Tied itself. Someone else snorts. That's what you said about your boots last week. Another voice chimes in. You aren't cursed. My uncle once cast a net that pulled up a pair of boots. Still laced, no feet. Just boots. Silence, then laughter. The sun finally breaks over the ridge, throwing soft gold over the racks of drying fish and the roofs of turf-covered huts. The net in your hands is starting to make sense now. It's no longer a monster, just a mess you've learned how to tame. You shift your weight and look around. 2 boys are dragging another net toward the group, this one frozen stiff at one end, still holding the shape of the barrel it was packed in. One of them pokes it with a stick. Should we thaw it first? He asks. No one answers. That's not how Viking fishermen work. You glance at Eric. He nods at you once. Not bad, he says. It's the Viking version of a gold medal. You help hang the repaired net on a tall rack. It smells like salt sweat and old fish, but it's functional. And in this village, function is sacred. The rest of the morning is spent coiling ropes, checking knots, and oiling oars. You try not to think about how many fish guts are embedded in the wood grain. Probably best to assume all of them. Lunch is a quiet affair. Cold flatbread dried fish torn by hand and a hunk of cheese so old it probably remembers your name. You eat it all, gratefully, teeth scraping against salt crystals and age. It's edible. As the afternoon winds down, Eric picks up a small net and gestures to the shoreline. Want to practice throwing? He asks. You nod, wiping crumbs from your chin. You wade into the shallows and learn how to cast the net wide, how to spin and release with just the right flick. Your first few throws are disasters. One lands on your own boots, another in a bush. But you get better. By the 10th try, the net fans out midair like a sunburst before splashing into the sea. Eric nods again. You're practically royalty now. Back on shore, someone builds a small fire and brews something that might be tea or possibly fermented root water. You drink it anyway. It's hot and it numbs your tongue. Good enough. The net's dry beside you, swinging gently in the wind. In the distance, you spot a group of gulls circling the harbor, screeching their usual nonsense. One lands on a rack, tries to steal a half-dried cod, and is promptly chased off by a boy with a stick. It's not heroic, it's not glamorous, but it's life. You sit beside the fire hands, finally warm boots drying slowly. The nets you mended today will hold strong tomorrow. The fish will swim. The sea will whisper, and you'll be ready. You rise the next morning to the sound of creaking oars and boots crunching over frost-crusted seaweed. The air bites a little harder today, like the fjord has decided to remind you who's in charge. Still, there's something about it, something clean and ancient, like a slate wiped by the wind. You stretch your arms, crack your back, and head down toward the shoreline where the boats are gathering. Today you're not patching nets or shooing gulls. Today you're heading out to fish again, but not in the mighty longships you've seen in stories. No dragon-headed beasts or sails billowing with fate. Just small, rugged boats designed to slice quietly through the water light, enough for 2 or 3 people to carry and sturdy enough to take a wave square to the ribs. This is the Viking fishing fleet, practical plane, and still ready to tip you overboard if you shift your weight wrong. You help push one into the water. It's made of pine lashed together with iron nails and patience. The planks creak like an old man's knees. Your fingers sting as you grip the edge, but there's something satisfying about launching it into the gray water, like watching a wooden thought float away. You clamber in with Eric and another man named Thord, who speaks mostly in low grunts and has a beard so long it could double as a fishnet. The 3 of you take up oars and begin to row your strokes, slowly falling into rhythm. Water slaps against the sides. The coastline recedes. The mountains fold around you like sleeping giants. The wind is soft today, and the sun reflects on the water in broken lines. You're aiming for deeper waters, where the cod gather in schools thick enough to turn the sea black. As you row, Eric talks mostly about nothing. The fish, the wind, the time a seal stole his lunch and then had the audacity to bark at him. Historians still debate how often Viking fishermen ventured far from shore versus hugging the coast. Some believe they stayed close to land, wary of the deeper ocean. Others argue they were bolder than we give them credit for, already pushing out to sea long before the raiding parties carved paths to England and beyond. Judging by the worn look in Eric's eyes and the calluses on Thord's hands, you're inclined to believe the latter. You stop just past a rocky outcrop where the water is dark and still. Thord balances like a rock on a reed and begins uncoiling the net. It drops into the water with a slap, the rope lines tugging behind it like seaweed tentacles. Then you wait. Fishing isn't fast. It's not glamorous. But it's real. You sit in the bottom of the boat, back against a salt-streaked plank, and stare at the sky. Clouds drift lazily. A gull calls out overhead. Somewhere something splashes. You shift your weight, careful not to rock the boat. Thord squints at the water. Eirik snores softly. The sea breathes. Eventually, there's a tug on the rope. Thord grabs it and heaves. The net rises slowly, heavy dripping. You grab the other end and help pull. Fish. Cod, mostly long, pale, slippery things with faces that always seem mildly surprised. A few herring, 2 flickering like coins. 1 small flatfish with eyes on the same side of its head, which feels like a mistake. You laugh. Thord doesn't. You sort them quickly, good ones into a barrel, bad ones back into the sea. 1 fish flops with such enthusiasm it nearly escapes flapping straight toward your leg, like it's making a run for it. You manage to catch it barely and hold it up triumphantly. Name him Eric, says, eyes still closed. Then eat him later. The haul isn't massive, but it's decent. Enough to feed several households, trade a little, and hang on the racks by sundown. You row back slowly, the boat lower in the water, now heavier and more content. Near shore, a boy waves from the rocks. "Storm's coming," he shouts, pointing at the clouds bunching in the distance. Thord grunts. "It'll wait," he mutters. You're not sure it will. Back on land, you haul the fish barrels up to the racks. Your arms burn. Your back complains. But there's something satisfying about it all, like stacking proof of your work. Fish are cleaned, gutted, and hung. The gulls circle overhead, eyeing your success with suspicion. You glance at the sky. The clouds are darker now, coiling low and heavy. You might get rain before nightfall, maybe snow, but for now the catch is safe. Someone calls your name and tosses you a skin of water, fresh cold, and tinged with a taste of smoke from the storage pot. You drink deeply and sit on a wooden beam to rest. The wind picks up, threading through your hair and humming against the racks like a low whistle. The boats are pulled ashore, flipped upside down to protect them from the coming storm. Children poke at stray fish heads with sticks. A dog tries to claim one and is promptly scolded by a toddler. You lean back, watching the clouds swirl above the peaks. The sea is already darkening, the waves more aggressive now. But you're dry, your boots are off, and your hands smell like victory and cod. You close your eyes. You don't need a long ship to feel like a Viking. Sometimes a boat, a net, and a handful of fish are enough. You wake to the sound of dripping. Not rain, though it rained plenty in the night, but fish. More specifically, rows upon rows of freshly cleaned cod, now hanging from the tall wooden racks, tails swaying in the cold breeze, shedding briny drops like a salty metronome. The storm hit after sunset and passed in the early hours, leaving behind puddles, overturned buckets, and a lot of complaining. The village smells sharper today, saltier, riper, like yesterday's catch decided to shout about itself. You trudge outside, boots squishing through mud and seaweed. Several others are already up, checking the drying racks, retying ropes, swatting away gulls with long sticks. One bird, bolder than the rest, has managed to wedge itself between two racks and is currently helping itself to a partially dried herring. Eric chucks a pebble at it with the precision of a man who's been at war with seagulls his entire life. The bird squawks offended and flies off. Another morning in paradise, he mutters, then hands you a wooden pole. We've got a few fish to save. You spend the next hour checking each rack. Some fish have dried beautifully firm, light, smelling like sea wind and smoke. Others less fortunate. A few are too damp, too soft, or already turning. You scrape those off and toss them into a slop bucket. They'll be boiled down into fish paste, later perfect for stew sauces and, unfortunately, jokes. Drying fish isn't glamorous, but it's sacred. Without it, no one eats when the sea freezes or the long ships are away. A single rack might hold enough to feed a family through winter if the gulls rot and storms don't claim it first. Historians still debate the full extent of Viking preservation methods. Drying, smoking, salting, each region had its own flavor, and in many cases, its own smell. Some say certain towns could be identified from miles away just by the fish-scented wind. You believe it. After sorting the racks, you help carry the good fillets to the storage hut. It's a low, sod-roofed building tucked near the back of the village, where the shadows linger longer and the ground stays cold. Inside, rows of wooden shelves hold dried fish wrapped in cloth and twine. The air is thick with decades of salt and smoke so strong it could pickle a bear. Eric unwraps a bundle and pulls out a particularly old piece. 2 winters ago, he says. Still good. You're skeptical. He bites off a chunk and chews with the slow determination of a man proving a point. Then he offers you some. You accept? Of course you do. It's tough. Very tough. Like chewing a piece of driftwood soaked in ocean and time. You nod politely. Tastes like survival, you manage to say. He laughs. Exactly. Outside, a group of women sit near the hearth, preparing fish for lunch. They slice fillets into thin strips, rub them with herbs, and hang them again over a slow, smoky fire. One of them gestures for you to come over. You sit, and she hands you a bowl of something warm turnip stew with bits of smoked cod and seaweed. It smells far better than it looks. You blow on it, take a cautious sip, and are surprised to find it delicious. Earthy, savory, and briny in a good way. They ask about your morning, and you describe the gull fight, the tragic state of Rack 3, and the vintage cod taste test. One woman laughs so hard she nearly drops her ladle. Another says, that's how you know it's working. If you're not crying, you're lying. After lunch, you help set up the next batch of fish to dry. The wind's changed direction cooler, now blowing in from the mountains. That means faster drying if the clouds stay away. Someone sets up a new rack near the water's edge, taller than the others, with wider spacing between the beams. This one's for a special batch, larger cod, maybe a few haddock if they're lucky. The fish will be dried slightly less, then smoked, then packed for trade. You help stretch the fish on the rack, careful not to tear the skin. Each one is tied with twine and a little twist of straw, a trick Eric says keeps the flies off. You don't ask how he knows. You just accept it. As the sun lowers, the racks become silhouettes against the pale orange sky. The fish sway gently, casting long shadows like sails waiting for wind. It's oddly beautiful. You sit on a rock and watch the smoke rise from nearby fires, carrying the scent of salted survival into the air. Someone offers you a small cup of something warm. It's fish broth, brewed from scraps and bones, spiced with fennel and mystery. You sip slowly, feeling it warm your stomach and settle into your bones. The sky darkens. Another day of drying and saving what the sea gave. You brush fish scales from your sleeves, stretch your sore arms, and look around the village. Men fixing gear, women stirring pots, children playing with wooden fish carved from scraps. Everyone moving like parts of the same slow, steady machine. Not a longship in sight. Just salt smoke and 100 fish dancing gently in the wind. You wake to a smell that might be described generously as economically necessary. It's fish again, of course, it's fish, but now with a twist of vinegar, a hint of rot, and the unmistakable aroma of ambition. Today, you're assigned to the preservation hut, where fish are salted smoked, and depending on who you ask, fermented. This is where the magic happens. And by magic, we mean the slow, questionable alchemy of thyme salt and a stubborn refusal to let good protein go to waste. You start the day hauling heavy sacks of salt from a shed near the fjord. The salt is coarse, clumpy, and damp from the sea air. It's not the delicate sprinkle of a modern kitchen. This is brick salt meant to cure crust and conquer whatever it touches. Inside the hut, slabs of fish are packed into wooden barrels in thick layers, fish salt, until the whole barrel groans under the weight. Your hands are quickly coated in crystals, your fingernails stinging slightly from tiny cuts you didn't know you had. But it works. Salt has kept fish edible through winters and sea voyages alike. Historians still debate how widespread fish salting was in Viking communities versus simple drying or smoking. Evidence suggests that where salt was abundant, especially near trade routes, it became vital. And while it doesn't smell particularly romantic, it does smell like survival. You help seal one of the barrels and roll it toward the shaded side of the hut. There it will sit for weeks, maybe months, sweating out brine and absorbing flavor. You wonder who will eat this, someone in your village or a trader 100 miles away. Next, you're shown the smoke racks where filets are hung above low fires. The smoke is thick, almost sweet, tinged with birch and a few herbs someone tossed in for luck. The fillets hang like linen in a windless laundry, glistening slightly, darkening slowly. You turn each one by hand, checking for dryness, brushing off any ash that settles. Your eyes sting. Your clothes absorb the smell. You start to wonder if you'll ever not smell like a campfire mackerel again. Eirik steps in with a grin and hands you a cup of something hot. To clear the nose, he says. You sip cautiously. It's mead. Strong, slightly sour, laced with herbs. It doesn't help the smell, but it dulls your awareness of it. Then comes the fermenting pit. At the back of the hut, beneath a heavy plank, there's a shallow earthen basin lined with stone and packed with, well, let's call it a legacy. It's where certain fish, usually herring or smaller species, are layered with just enough salt to stop total rot, but not enough to stop everything. Covered and left to sit, they break down into a rich, oily paste that can be stored and stirred into stew or smeared on bread or avoided entirely. Today, you help stir it. You lift the lid. Regret. The smell hits you like a mailed fist. It's sour, oily, and somehow wet in an emotional sense. You gag slightly. Everyone does the first time. One woman hands you a cloth to tie over your nose. Breathe through your mouth, she says. You do. It does not help. But once you get used to it, if that's even the right word, it becomes just another scent. Strong, yes, but part of the rhythm, part of the process. You stir the paste with a flat wooden spatula, watching it shift and glisten like something alive. You're told this particular batch is nearly ready. It's been fermenting for over a month, and by the standards of the village, it's a good one. Historians are still uncertain whether the Vikings truly practiced fish fermentation to the same extent as later Nordic cultures, but signs point to at least a few regional variants. And based on the gleam in Eric's eye as he tastes a fingerful and mutters, "That's the stuff," you're convinced. The fermenting paste is packed into sealed jars made of clay, wrapped in cloth and buried under snow or stashed in cool corners. It's not glamorous. It's not appealing. But it's high in protein, low in waste, and according to one elder, better than chewing leather. Later, you're invited to taste a finished batch on rye bread. You hesitate, but curiosity is stronger than caution, and you take a bite. It's complex, salty, pungent, and slightly fizzy. Your eyes water. Your mouth feels both betrayed and impressed. Everyone watches. You nod solemnly. It's interesting. They cheer. You're one of them now. As the sun drops low, you help scrub down the hut floor with brine and pine needles, a kind of ritual more about habit than hygiene. The racks sway gently, still smoking. The ferment pit is covered. The barrels are stacked. The job is done. You sit outside, back against the wall, cup of warm broth in hand. It's seasoned with a tiny dollop of the paste you stirred. It's actually good this way. The flavor spreads more evenly, balanced, deep. You sip again, slower this time. The stars begin to blink awake above the fjord. Somewhere nearby, someone is humming. The wind smells like salt smoke and something earned. You exhale. You may never stop smelling like a smoked fish again, but at least now you know why. You wake with a mouth like driftwood and a dull ache behind your eyes. It's not the fish this time. It's the mead. Last night, someone decided it was a fine occasion for a small celebration, which in Viking terms translates roughly to drink until your elbows forget what floor means. You'd only intended a sip, then two. Then someone handed you a horn carved with runes and challenged you to keep up. Bad decision. Or perhaps, as Eric calls it, a character-building experience. Now it's morning, and you're pretty sure the inside of your skull has developed its own echo. Welcome to the life of a hungover Viking fisherman. You drag yourself out of the longhouse and blink against the sunlight, which is somehow both too bright and incredibly smug. The world tilts slightly, or maybe that's just your balance. Eric sits nearby, looking far too cheerful for someone who definitely drank at least as much as you. He's gutting fish with a casual precision that makes your stomach churn. He sees your face and hands you a cup of something suspiciously cloudy. Cure, he says. You drink it. It's sour, fizzy, a little salty, possibly made from fermented turnip. But halfway through, the pounding in your head eases just enough to remember your name. You exhale through your nose, trying not to breathe in too much fish at once. Today's assignment: don't fall overboard. You join the crew, hauling boats out again. The row is slower, sloppier. Thord is here too. He looks like someone dragged him through a kelp bed and forgot to rinse. He grunts once, then leans against his oar like it's holding him up emotionally. Despite the fog in everyone's heads, the sea doesn't care. The water is still cold, still rolling, still demanding respect. You cast your net with slightly trembling hands and pray to whatever god handles nausea control, fishing. While hungover is a delicate dance. Too much motion and your breakfast revisits. Too little effort and you lose the net. You find a rhythm, slow pulls. Steady breathing eyes focused on the horizon like a monk contemplating waves. The boat rocks. Eric hums. Thord retches quietly over the side. All is well. Eventually the net tugs back. You brace yourself. And together you haul up a modest catch, nothing glorious but enough to justify the effort. Cod, of course. A couple of herring. One fish that looks a little too smug and goes back overboard out of spite. Historians might not focus on this part, the not-so-glorious mornings after, but archaeology tells us that Vikings drank regularly, often with meals, and sometimes very heavily. Mead beer and even fruit wines were part of daily life, and yes, they still went fishing after. You row back slower than usual, your arms ache, your head throbs, your eyes are so dry they might be made of sand, but you made it. You didn't fall in. That's a win. Back on land, you're offered another cure. This one is fish broth with fermented herbs, and mysteriously a pickled egg floating in it. You hesitate, then sip. It helps, slightly. Midday is spent mending nets again. No one talks much. The mood is subdued, like the whole village is running on one collective headache. Children dart by with wooden fish toys, laughing far too loudly. You try not to glare at them. An older woman hands you a strip of dried fish and tells you to chew slowly. It draws the humors out, she claims. You have no idea if that's true, but she's watching, so you chew. The texture is like jerky, and shoe leather had a child. But your head eases again. By late afternoon, the fog in your mind starts to lift. You regain enough focus to help pack today's modest haul. The fish are cleaned with less banter than usual, but the work gets done. A few jokes start to reappear. Someone throws a fish head at Thord. He grunts, then throws one back. Progress. You end the day sitting on the edge of the dock, feet dangling above the cold water. The sky is soft, now gray, and peach, the kind of sky that feels like a blanket. You watch the last gull glide over the bay and feel your breath steady. One of the elders passes by and says, "Drinking teaches you two things, when to stop and how to keep going when you didn't." You nod. Vikings didn't just conquer and raid. They lived, they worked, they overdid it sometimes and still went fishing the next morning. You're not a hero today, but you showed up, and sometimes that's more than enough. You wake to the smell of firewood and seawater and something else. Something smoky and sharp, earthy and green. You follow your nose to a cooking hearth near the edge of the village where a large iron pot simmers over a gentle flame. Inside, fish stew. Again. But this time it's not just boiled cod and resignation. There's color, there's effort. Someone has gone out of their way to flavor it. And today, you're learning how Viking fishermen cooked when they weren't rushed hungover or trying to survive on dried leather and turnips. You're handed a long wooden spoon and told to stir. The stew resists. It's thick with sliced root sprigs of dried herbs and chunks of fish so fresh it probably still remembers the fjord. You inhale deeply. It's not exactly gourmet, but compared to fermented herring paste and cold smoked scraps, this might as well be a feast. One of the women nearby adds something green seaweed chopped fine like an herb. For salt, she says, and winks. Another tosses in a splash of seawater, just to keep things honest. Historians still debate the culinary practices of the Norse, especially in fishing villages. While meat and dairy were common, inland coastal diets leaned heavily into the sea cod, herring, flounder mussels, and even seal in the leaner months. But Viking stew, that was the glue. Always hot, always shared, always just edible enough. You help prepare the rest of the meal. Flatbread is griddled on stones, browned and bubbled like ancient pancakes. Some are rubbed with garlic or wild onion. Others are left plain, the kind you tear and dip into the stew while trying to pretend it's not just yesterday's leftovers reheated. Someone hands you a side dish, pickled fish, cut into small pieces and laid out like a dare. It's sharp cold and bites back in a way that reminds you you're alive. You eat it anyway. As lunch nears, the workers gather fishermen, net menders, kids with dirty faces, and elders who haven't touched a net in decades, but still know more about knots than anyone else. Bowls are passed, cups are filled. The stew is ladled steaming and thick into wooden bowls, worn smooth by years of use. You eat slowly. It's hot, hearty, a little bland, but satisfying in that this will keep me alive through a blizzard kind of way. You tear your bread scoop, up stew chew, and listen. Stories bubble up with the steam. A man across from you claims he once caught a fish with a tiny bone spear still lodged in its side. From a dwarf, he says. No one corrects him. A woman adds she once smoked fish so well it stayed edible for 2 winters if you had no nose. They laugh, eat dunk their bread, and carry on. You help clean the pot when the meal is over, scraping out the last sticky bits and tossing scraps to the waiting dog nearby. You thank the cooks. They smile and hand you a bundle of dried herbs for next time. You nod solemnly, already unsure how to identify half of what's inside. Later, you help collect kindling for the next fire. The woods nearby are sparse but still generous. You gather sticks, snap branches, and even pull up a piece of driftwood that smells like every fish that ever lived. Perfect for smoking. As you return, you pass the herb drying rack behind one of the longhouses. Strings of dried garlic, kelp moss, and something purple sway gently in the breeze. You ask what the purple stuff is. For stomach aches, someone replies. Or for flavor, depends who you ask. Inside the cookhouse, one of the elders is preparing something new fish cakes. Mashed cod flour made from ground barley herbs and an egg. You help mix the batter, then spoon it onto a hot stone. The smell is incredible, crispy edges, bubbling fat, and a whiff of salt. You taste one. It's actually good. Crispy outside, warm and flaky inside. A little chewy, a lot salty. You want another, you get 2. Maybe 3, you lose count. Historians often overlook these small comforts. The assumption is always survival over taste, necessity over nuance. But sitting here chewing something fried and warm, you realize even Viking fishermen had cravings. Even they knew the joy of a good crust. As the sun dips lower, you help tidy the area. The stones are cooled. The ashes are buried. The leftover bread is wrapped in linen and tucked into a storage basket. You take a walk to the edge of the fjord, cups still warm in your hands, filled with the last of the stew. The air is still, the water calm. Fish bones from lunch hang in a net to dry for bait, or broth, no one's sure yet. You sit on a log, sip your broth, and let the quiet settle in. This is Viking life between raids, not shouting, not swordplay, just fish, fire, food, and the slow rhythm of hands that know what to do. You lean back, bellyful, heart quiet. Tomorrow you'll fish again, but tonight you digest. The next morning you're not sent to the boats, the nets, or the drying racks. Instead, you find yourself in a smoky corner of the village, stirring something troubling in a wooden bowl. It's sauce, allegedly. It doesn't smell bad exactly, but it does smell alive and possibly philosophical. Sharp, funky, a little fermented, and deeply suspicious. One of the cooks pats your shoulder and says, "It's a gift from the gods." Then she winks. You don't feel reassured. Welcome to the world of Viking fish sauces. Today's brew is based on the leftover bits from recent catches, tiny bones, fish heads, chopped up herbs, and some oily goo from the bottom of the fermenting barrel. All of it's mashed into a paste and left in a clay jar with salt, vinegar, and thyme. Then when the moment feels right, or when someone dares to, it's opened and stirred back to life. You swirl the spoon in slow circles, trying not to breathe too deeply. It bubbles faintly, and someone behind you mutters, "That means it's ready." You're not sure what it means, but it feels like the kind of thing you'd use to polish metal or wake the dead. Historians have yet to confirm the exact nature of Viking condiments, but there are theories that fermented fish sauce or garum-like substitutes were used to add flavor to otherwise bland food. The Romans loved their garum. The Norse may have had something similar, though theirs likely came with more head nods and less fanfare. You carry the bowl to a flat rock where lunch is being prepared: roasted flatbread, dried herring, and bits of salted meat from a previous catch. The sauce is offered as a dip. You hesitate, then dip. It's complex, salty, earthy, with a punch like biting into history's most aggressive pickle. Your eyes water, your lips tingle. But after a moment, you go in for another bite, not because it's delicious, but because your mouth refuses to admit defeat. The others watch you carefully. Eric grins. Told you it had character. Later, you help prepare a new batch. You gather herbs, dill, fennel, wild onion, and grind them with a flat stone. You add seaweed and some dried berries for balance. A fish head is dropped in at the last moment for depth. You're told to stir it clockwise only. Why, no one knows. It's just how it's done. You begin to understand Viking food isn't about precision, it's about instinct, about knowing your fish, your fire, your salt, and your sauce, and knowing when to stop stirring. By mid-afternoon, someone brings out an older batch of sauce that has been buried under snow for preservation. It's cold, congealed, and shaped like its container. You chip some off and mix it into a stew. It melts slowly, releasing a scent that could double as insect repellent. But the stew, it's richer, more flavorful. The sauce, terrifying though it is, works. You sit with the others around the fire, eating bowls of hot stew with bits of fish cake and a generous spoonful of your latest concoction. One of the elders taps her spoon against her bowl and says, "This batch doesn't sing yet. Add pine sap next time." You nod as if you've always considered that. A boy nearby dares someone to eat a spoonful of sauce plain. A girl accepts the challenge, swallows it with dramatic flair, and immediately bursts into giggles. "Tastes like a dare," she says. No one argues. You help clean up afterwards, scraping out bowls, rinsing spoons in seawater, and adding the leftover sauce back into the jar for another round of maturation. You suspect the jar might outlive everyone in the village. Later, you carry a sealed jar of sauce down to the storage hut. It's carefully labeled with 3 notches on the lid, either to mark its strength or to warn the unwise. You place it on a shelf beside a small pot of smoked roe and something pickled you don't dare open. As the sun sets, you return to your usual log by the shore. The wind smells like salt and fire, but also something deeper now, something aged and layered and strange. It smells like sauce, and you're not mad about it. You sip a warm drink from a carved cup made with herbs and a dash of fermented brine. It tastes better than it sounds. You watch the water ripple gently, the reflection of the clouds turning amber and soft. The sea has fed you, challenged you, and flavored your dinner with things you can't quite explain. You lean back, letting the evening settle around you like a wool cloak. Vikings raided with axes, sailed with skill, and told stories to scare gods. But between all that they stirred sauce, and it was glorious. The clouds roll low over the fjord as you step out into the morning air, bracing yourself against a breeze that carries both mist and gossip. Today isn't for fishing or cooking. Today you head to the docks not with a net, but with a barrel. It's trade day, and in this corner of the Viking world, salted fish is currency. The village feels different when traders are expected. There's an unspoken rush beneath everyone's movements. Nets tied down, racks, straightened boots, scrubbed just enough to look respectably worn. Children are warned not to throw fish guts at the visitors. Again. You help load 2 barrels onto a low boat with shallow sides. One contains dried cod, the other salted herring. A third barrel, smaller, sealed with wax, contains fermented fish paste. It's tightly corked. Someone mutters a quiet prayer over it, presumably to keep it from leaking and ending the voyage early. Eirik joins you carrying a pouch of soapstone beads and a loop of knotted twine, just in case they're feeling fancy, he says. Then he gives the boat a push, and off you go. You row across calm water under a sky the color of ash. The fjord is quiet today. No gulls, no seals, just the steady splash of oars and the occasional bump of a barrel settling too aggressively against your knee. The market isn't far, a small clearing where 3 rivers meet, marked by fire pits and a ring of flat stones worn smooth by generations of trading boots. Other boats are already arriving. Some carry fur, others pottery. One has a giant woven basket filled with what looks suspiciously like turnips, pretending to be exciting. You dock and unload. The traders are a mix of familiar and foreign faces. One man has boots made from sealskin. Another wears his beard in braids wrapped with copper wire. A woman unwraps a cloth bundle and reveals glass beads, deep blue-red, as berries green like moss in spring. You feel your pouch of fish paste suddenly become a little less glamorous. But here it's all about exchange. You present your barrels with a flourish and a shrug. The other traders lean in, sniff poke, and nod in that slow, considered way that says, this'll do. Within an hour, your fish has earned you 2 whetstones, a bundle of pine resin, 3 bronze buttons, a small carved comb, and somehow a goose. The goose is not your idea, but it has decided it likes you, so now it's yours. Historians know that fish, particularly stockfish dried hard cod, was one of the Viking Age's most important trade goods. It traveled well, lasted for months, and was light enough to carry without breaking your back. From Norway to Dublin, from Iceland to Kiev, Viking fish found its way into markets' kitchens, and very likely more than a few complaints. You walk through the market slowly taking in the colors, smells, and sounds. Someone is roasting something over a fire that smells incredible. You trade one of your bronze buttons for a skewer of charred meat, maybe lamb, maybe goat, maybe ambitious squirrel. You don't ask, you just eat. Beside a large flat rock, a man is demonstrating a fishing trap made from willow branches and clever knots. You watch fascinated as he explains in 3 different dialects and a lot of hand gestures how the fish swim in but can't find their way out. It's like a puzzle, but with dinner at the end. You offer him a slice of dried cod. He hands you a bundle of netting samples in return, barter at its finest. Later, you sit by the river, sharing a cup of mead with an old trader who claims to have once sold a barrel of herring for half a cow and a broken harp. The harp was cursed, he says, but the herring was fine. You nod. That checks out. You ask about other markets farther away. He describes rivers that freeze solid where fish is sliced so thin it crackles in the wind. Islands where fermented shark is a delicacy. A town where they flavor their fish with birch bark and tree sap. Tastes like regret, he says, but in a good way. By sunset, your boat is lighter, your barrels emptied, your pouch full of oddments, and a goose who refuses to sit still. You row home in silence, the fjord bathed in orange light. Eric snores at the front of the boat hat pulled low. The goose sits at your feet, staring judgmentally at your rowing technique. Back at the village, you're welcomed with a nod. The beads and buttons are admired, the resin is handed to the cooks, and the goose is tolerated. You set your new treasures on a small cloth, the comb, the netting samples, the whetstones. None of them sparkle, but they feel earned. You eat dinner by the fire stew again, but this time with a dash of birch bark as a joke. It's not terrible. You fall asleep with the taste of fish and pine still on your tongue, the hum of the market still echoing in your bones. Trading fish, it turns out, buys more than goods. It buys stories. You wake to a rhythmic thudding, soft, uneven, and far too energetic for how early it is. You poke your head out of the longhouse and see Thord standing by the waterline, holding a bucket and wearing the kind of expression that says, "Don't talk to me until I've cursed at something." It's another fishing day, but today's a special kind of ordeal. Because today, everyone is hungover, again. Last night was a naming feast. A baby was given their first proper name after 3 days of being watched to make sure they'd survive, of course. The whole village turned out. Mead flowed. Fish was grilled. Someone tried to juggle dried cod. Someone else succeeded. The baby, you're told, slept through most of it. You, however, did not. Now you're clambering into a boat with your stomach doing slow backflips and your head pulsing like an overfull barrel. You row. Eric rows too, humming something ancient and irritating. You try to hate him for his chipper mood, but you lack the energy. The sea is choppy today. Not dangerous, but just active enough to make everything worse. The boat rocks like a cradle, which would be comforting if you weren't trying very hard not to be seasick in front of Thord. He stares at you once, silently passes you a rag. No judgment, just shared experience. You cast your net, slowly, carefully. You wait. A gull screams overhead, and it feels personal. Thord mutters, "They know." You're not sure if he means the gulls or the fish. Either way, he's probably right. Eventually, you get a bite. The net jerks. You brace your boot's hull carefully and bring up a solid catch. Mostly herring, a few small cod, one eel that looks like it resents your existence. Back on shore, you help clean the fish. Slowly. The smell is worse when you're fragile, but the work grounds you. Gut rinse, repeat. You fall into a rhythm that almost soothes your headache. Lunchtime comes. You're offered fish stew again, this time with extra pickled onion to wake you up. You try a bite. It tastes like punishment, but it works. The children run past, shrieking in joy, slapping each other with dried fish tails. You cover your eyes and groan. One woman nearby chuckles. You look like you fought a troll in your dreams. You murmur, "I think the troll won." Historians rarely speak about these quieter parts of Viking life, the in-between days, the days after celebration, after stories are told and songs are sung. But here among the fish, the fog and the pounding in your skull, you realize how common this is. They feast, they drink, they regret, they still fish. By afternoon, you're feeling more human. You help a group of kids untangle a small net caught on a rock. You teach them how to fold it properly like Eric taught you. They listen. Sort of. One girl insists she saw a fish spirit last night in the stew pot. No one disagrees. Later, Thord hands you a cup of something warm. It's not mead. It's a hangover remedy made from boiled fish bones, seaweed, and some herbs that might be moss. It smells awful. You drink it. It helps. You walk the shoreline collecting driftwood for the evening fire. Your boots squelch through the mud. The breeze is kinder now. The sun, muted behind low clouds, turns the water into rippling pewter. You sit on a rock and look out over the fjord. There are no raids today, no ships coming in, just boats bobbing gently, nets drying, fires crackling, fish being salted, stirred, grilled, or quietly stared at with resentment. You remember Eric's advice? Some days you fish to eat. Some days you fish because sitting still is worse. You get it now. By evening, the village gathers again, this time more quietly. No mead, just broth. No drums, just voices low and slow. People sitting on logs, eating slowly, and patting their bellies with the weariness of good company and poor decisions. Someone tells a joke about a fish so smelly it sank its own boat. Everyone chuckles. You smile. You clean your bowl, wrap yourself in a cloak, sit by the fire and listen to the wind. Another hangover survived. Another net cast. Tomorrow it all begins again. The wind is soft this morning, barely more than a whisper as it skims across the fjord and rustles the kelp-strewn rocks along the shore. You stretch your arms, shake the stiffness from your back, and glance toward the boats. But today, no one's launching anything. Instead, a line of kids trails past you barefoot and giggling, each dragging their own bundle of string shells and makeshift fishing poles. One even has a tiny spear carved from driftwood, its tip wrapped in copper wire. You blink. Then you're handed a small coil of line and pointed toward the water. You've just been recruited as a fishing instructor. The elders call it catch practice, though the term is generous. It's more about teaching the young ones to handle lines, identify seaweed from fish, and ideally avoid impaling themselves or each other. The kids take it very seriously right up until they fall over in the mud. You lead them down to a shallow inlet where the water pools calmly around smooth stones. Crabs skitter sideways. Minnows dart between shadows. The children shout in delight at every ripple. Your job is to show them how to cast, how to be patient, and how not to shriek every time a fish so much as glances at them. You kneel beside one boy with wild hair and a spear twice his height. He jabs it into the water with all the subtlety of a thunderclap, misses wildly, and frowns. You have to wait, you whisper. Let them come to you. He blinks, then immediately jabs again. Patience will come. Eventually. Nearby, two girls have turned a net into a hammock and are arguing about who gets to scout from above. Another boy has tied bait to a stick and is trying to negotiate with a fish. You let it all happen. Learning by chaos is still learning. Historians often focus on Viking warriors training with swords and shields, but here you see a quieter kind of instruction. How to live, how to wait, how to fish, even if nothing bites. Mid-morning, someone brings down flatbread and a jug of fish broth for the group. The kids groan. One boy mutters, "Why can't we just eat stew without fish for once?" He's met with universal agreement. You can't blame them. After the snack, they scatter again. You help untangle lines, untie knots, and pull a particularly adventurous child out of the reeds. She claims she was tracking a water spirit. You nod solemnly. Did it whisper anything? She pauses. It said, "I need a bigger spear." You make a mental note to check the storage hut. Eventually, someone actually catches something. A tiny silver fish, no bigger than a thumb, flapping indignantly in a hand-woven basket. The kids gather around, eyes wide. They cheer. They name it Fishy. A debate breaks out: free it or eat it. Fishy is returned to the sea with ceremony and a song. The rest of the morning passes in that strange, timeless way that all slow days do: sun-climbing breeze, whispering laughter echoing against rock and water. By afternoon, the kids are exhausted, muddy, damp, grinning. You lead them back toward the village where a few parents wait with towels, bowls of broth, and varying degrees of amused resignation. You return to the shoreline alone now and sit for a while. Your hands smell like wet rope and fish slime. Your knees ache, but your heart feels full in that rare, quiet way. You gather the tools: mini poles, tangled lines, bent sticks that once dreamed of being spears, and stack them neatly beside the longhouse wall. Later, one of the elders nods at you from beside the fire. "It's not just about catching," she says. "It's about teaching them not to fear the water or the waiting." You nod. She's right. You join the evening meal: small bowls of root stew and grilled fish on skewers. One of the kids offers you a bite of flatbread. "It doesn't have fish in it," she whispers. You take it with gratitude. Afterward, you sit near the drying racks, watching the last of the sun slant across the fjord. Fish sway in the breeze, boats bob gently on their tethers, and the stars begin to appear like pinpricks in a darkening sky. You think about the boy with the spear, the girl tracking spirits, the one who named a fish and let it go. These are the ones who will cast nets long after your arms grow tired. The ones who will stir stews, mend lines, barter cod, and laugh at gulls. You close your eyes. You've passed something on. You awaken to a curious hush. Not silence exactly, but the kind of quiet that means everyone is watching something. You step outside the longhouse and scan the fjord. The boats are still moored. The wind is barely a breath. But all eyes are turned toward the waterline, where a boy is standing, stock still, pointing toward the waves. Then someone shouts, "Whale!" and suddenly the entire village comes alive. You squint, shielding your eyes against the morning glare, and yes, there it is, a massive dark shape, breaking the surface just far enough offshore to blur the line between awe and imagination. A long, slow arch of a back, a puff of mist, a ripple that takes its time. You've never seen a whale this close, nor have most of the villagers, judging by the collective mix of gasps, running feet, and contradictory guesses. It's a humpback. No, a sea serpent. It's definitely just Eric floating on his back. Eric, for the record, is still asleep. You follow the crowd to the water's edge. The kids are bouncing with excitement. The elders stand a little apart, nodding gravely and muttering things like, "It's a sign." A woman clutches a fishbone talisman around her neck. You're handed a pair of wooden paddles and pointed toward one of the smaller boats. The goal isn't to chase the whale, but to get a better look. You and two others row out cautiously, oars slicing the surface with practiced care. The shape reappears, a gentle rise in the water, maybe 100 paces ahead. It lingers for a breath, then vanishes again. The rower in front of you whispers, "It's watching us." You whisper back, "Let's hope it doesn't hold grudges." Historians still argue over the role whales played in Viking life. There's little evidence of active hunting, especially in the early Viking age. But when one washed ashore, it was seen as a gift from the gods, a bounty of meatbone oil and story. You row slowly in its direction, the fjord stretching wide and still around you. The only sounds are oars dipping, breath held, and one boy whispering a wish under his breath. Then movement. The water lifts and rolls, and a tail rises above the surface, elegant and impossibly wide. It slaps the water with a crack that echoes through your bones. The boat rocks violently. Someone yelps. The rest of you grip the sides and laugh through your fear. Then the whale is gone, sliding back into the depths as if it was never there. Only ripples remain. You drift for a while, unsure whether to row back or wait for another sign. Finally, someone says, "Well, we saw it." And someone else replies, "It saw us." You return to shore heroes, of course. The kids demand details. The elders nod with quiet approval. A fisherman you barely know presses a carved bone charm into your hand and says, "For protection." You wonder if he's serious. You decide not to test it. Later around the fire, the whale takes on new identities. It becomes Yermungandr, the world serpent swimming in disguise. Or perhaps it's the soul of a long-dead sailor returned to check on the village. One boy insists it looked directly at him and blinked. Everyone agrees that sounds right. Someone asks if it could be caught. The village quiets. "No net that big," someone says. And "No man that lucky." You sit with your bowl of stew, yes, still fish, and think about what you saw. The way it moved, the sound it made, the silence it left behind. There's a kind of magic in seeing something huge and calm, something that exists whether you believe in it or not. Before bed, you carve a small whale shape into a piece of driftwood. Not well, it's lopsided and blunt, but it feels right. You hang it near your mat in the longhouse. Outside, the fjord is still, but the sea, you now understand, never truly rests. It waits, and sometimes it reminds you. The next day, the sky turns slate gray, and the air thickens with a damp hush storms coming. You can smell it in the driftwood, hear it in the gulls' silence, feel it in the way every door creaks a little louder, as if even the longhouses are bracing for what's rolling in. No boats go out today, no nets are cast. Instead, the village gathers near the boathouse, where the walls are thick and the roof low, not for hiding, but for waiting. You're handed a bundle of kindling and follow Eric inside, ducking beneath heavy timbers carved with spirals and sea beast shapes. The air smells like old fishwood smoke and wool. Everyone settles in slowly, like they've done this 100 times before. They have. The wind begins with a whisper, then a hum, then a push. The boathouse groans slightly, but no one flinches. Instead, someone strikes flint and coaxes a fire to life in the hearth at the center. Shadows flicker against the walls. You settle onto a fur-wrapped bench knees, tucked up cup in hand. And then the stories begin. You've heard the term storm stories before, but now you understand. They're not just entertainment. They're offerings to the wind, distractions from the thunder, and reminders that this village has survived worse. A man tells of the time his father rode straight into a squall and came back with a boat full of fish and frostbitten eyebrows. Another claims to have seen a ghost ship through the mist, crewed by men with hollow eyes and oars that dripped with sea foam instead of water. You sip your broth slowly, letting the words settle. One elder begins a tale about a fisherman who could speak to whales. He never needed a net, they say, just whispered to the waves, and the fish would leap into his boat. Someone coughs and mutters, "He was drunk, though." Everyone nods. Then Eric clears his throat. He tells the story of a night like this long ago, when the storm howled so loud it cracked the sky. A boat had gone missing, small manned by two brothers who hadn't returned. The next morning, they found the boat upside down, empty far up the shore. But nearby, a perfect circle in the sand, a spiral carved by no hand. Some say it was the sea claiming them. Others say it was a warning. No one talks for a moment after that. Then a girl speaks up. What if they became fish? Everyone laughs, tension, broken firelight, dancing again. Historians often dismiss oral tradition as unreliable. But here, with the wind curling under the door and the fire licking shadows into life, you feel the weight of it. These stories carry things, lessons, fears, names that would otherwise disappear. You lean your head back against the wall and listen as the next tale begins. This one-liner, about a fisherman who tricked a seal into trading him a silver coin for a crab. The seal still owes him change, someone adds, and everyone groans. Outside, rain begins to slap the roof. You hear it build first as taps, then as thuds, then as a steady drumming. Someone tosses more wood into the fire, and the room warms again. The wind whistles through a crack in the wall. A boy plugs it with a tuft of wool. Eric grins at you. Storm's got a voice tonight. You spend hours there, tucked in with your cup and your cloak, surrounded by laughter and myth. The walls may be thin, but the people inside are woven together like nets interlocked, weather-tested. Eventually, you help refill cups, pass around bread, and even tell a short story of your own. It's clumsy, half-remembered, probably borrowed from something you heard on a quieter day. But they listen, and they laugh, and that's all that matters. By nightfall, the storm is still hammering the village, but the stories have softened its teeth. You step outside briefly, the wind tugging at your cloak, and stare into the blackness where sea meets sky. Somewhere out there, the fish are riding the waves. The boats are resting. The gods, if they're listening, are probably smiling at the noise you made tonight. You head back inside, crawl onto your mat, and wrap yourself tight. You've weathered the storm, not by braving it, but by sharing the weight. You wake to calm. No thunder, no wind, just the drip of water from eaves and the quiet swish of wet wool being wrung out across the village. The storm has passed, leaving everything slick cold and strangely clear. Your boots are still damp from yesterday, but the air feels clean cleansed even. The sky has pulled itself back together, and the fjord lies smooth as hammered silver. The first order of the day, argument. Near the racks, two fishermen are already deep into it, gesturing wildly with paddles and pointing accusingly at each other's boats. You draw closer with your bowl of morning broth and catch the subject mid-sentence. Nets are faster. Spears are smarter. It's the great fishing technique debate, and it's in full swing. One man claims a well-thrown spear can outmatch any net in accuracy, says it's cleaner, nobler, and requires actual skill, not just letting a bunch of rope and hope sit in the water. The other retorts that a net doesn't need to be noble, it just needs to catch dinner. You sip your broth and stay neutral. They bring in a third fisherman for arbitration. He listens, squints at both of them, then shrugs and says, "Depends if you're hungry or showing off." The argument pauses. That might be the most Viking answer possible. Still, the topic lingers throughout the morning. As you clean tools, untangle cordage, and check the boat lines, you hear snatches of opinion. Nets don't lie. Spearfishing's just practice for raiding. Depends how drunk you are. Historians have debated this too, of course. Nets were widespread, woven from flax nettle, or sometimes horsehair. Durable, passive, efficient. But spearfishing, that's where skill and patience meet showmanship. Some archaeological finds include beautifully carved fishing spears suggesting pride as much as function. By midday, you're asked to test both. First, the net. You wade into the shallows with a small group net draped over one shoulder. The goal is simple: fan it out, let it settle, and slowly herd fish toward it. The water is clear, the sun overhead. You move slowly, rhythmically, like you're part of the fjord itself. A flicker movement in the shadows. You and the others begin to draw the net closed. It catches a dozen silvery fish, flapping wildly, then stilling. You lift it together, soaked and grinning. Clean, precise, satisfying. Then the spear. You're handed a short barbed one carved from ash wood, its tip hardened by fire. You enter a rocky tide pool, eyes scanning for movement. The fish here are fewer, warier, and the water trickier to read. You spot one. Hold your breath. Lunge. Miss. You try again. And again. On the third try, you nick one, a small herring that slips away in a flash of silver. You curse under your breath. The man watching from the rocks just grins. Now do that 100 times, he says, and you've earned your supper. Still, when you finally land one perfect aim, quick reflex, it feels like a victory carved from the sea. Personal, intimate. You head back to shore with your haul, one net full, one proud little fish on the spear. At the racks, the debate has cooled. Now it's all laughter and exaggeration. Someone paints a fish on the wall with charcoal, then draws a spear, going dramatically wide. Everyone chuckles. You join in, holding up your modest catch. Precision over quantity, you announce. Someone throws a net over your head. Fair. That evening, you help grill the day's fish over flat stones. The net-caught ones are cleaned, stuffed with herbs, and slow roasted. The speared fish, that one's handed to you. You caught it, someone says. You eat it. You roast it, simply salt smoke and patience. It's the best bite of fish you've had in weeks. After the meal, the conversation returns to boat's bait and best practices, but with softer edges now. Everyone agrees both methods have their place, especially if the fish are biting. You walk down to the water's edge before bed. The tide is out. The moon hangs low and golden over the fjord. A net sways gently in the wind drying. A spear rests beside the fire, propped like a trophy. And you caught fish both ways. Tomorrow you might just try a hook. The wind shifts direction overnight, and when you wake, the sea smells brighter, briny, and crisp, with none of yesterday's storm breath lingering in the air. You stretch dress and wander down toward the racks, expecting another routine day of network or fish sorting. Instead, you find a group gathered near the boats, not men, not boys, but women. They're hauling barrels, coiling lines. One is sharpening a gutting knife against a stone so quickly it sings. You hesitate just for a moment. Then Eric, passing by, grins and nods toward the shore. Better move. Those ladies fish faster than you blink. So you move. Because today the women are going to sea, and you're going with them. You help push the boat down the pebble shore. It's a little lighter than the others, a bit narrower at the prow, made not for speed, but for agility. The kind of boat that knows where the hidden rocks are and avoids them like gossip. At the helm is an older woman with a gray braid and eyes that could slice bark. No one questions her. She nods at you once. Sit there, she says, and you do. You push off. The row is steady, smooth, and surprisingly fast. These women aren't here to prove anything. They just work. Efficient, confident, experienced. The oars move like clock hands. The boat slides forward. You don't ask questions. Out past the kelp beds, the lead fisher gestures to drop the net. You help unfurl it, tightly knotted, freshly patched, looped in a style slightly different than Eric's. You cast it together. It lands perfectly, settles into the water like a woven whisper. And then, as always, you wait. Someone offers you a dried apple. You take it. It's tart, chewy, and the most fruit you've tasted since arriving. One of the women, younger, with sleeves rolled up to her elbows, pulls out a small carved token, a fishbone amulet tied with red thread. She kisses it and drops it into her pocket. You ask what it's for. Luck, she says, and memory. Historians often forget or downplay the role of women in Viking fishing villages. The raiding tales leave them behind. But here it's clear these women don't just fill in. They lead, they fish, they gut dry trade and teach. They are the quiet tide that holds the village upright. You haul the net back slowly. It's heavy. You feel the strain in your arms, the rope biting into your fingers. But when it breaks the surface, it's full cod herring and a few plump mackerel. You cheer. So does everyone else, but not loudly, just enough to mark the moment. The boat turns. You row home alongside them, muscles aching in the good way. Back on land, you help carry the barrels, your pace matched to theirs, your rhythm absorbed into theirs. Later, as the fish are being cleaned, you sit near the hearth with a bowl of hot broth. The gray braided fisher sits beside you and hums softly. Not a song, more like a remembering. You ask how long she's fished. Since I could walk, she says. Longer, maybe. I think I was born holding a net. You sip and nod. She tells you a story about her grandmother who once traded 3 fish for a pair of shoes that squeaked so loud they scared off birds for a season. Best deal I ever heard, she says. You laugh. Then you listen as they talk about tomorrow's weather, the moon's shape, and the way the cod are moving deeper this year. It's not superstition. It's science by rhythm. Observation passed through hands and years. One woman is fixing her net by lantern light. Another is salting a barrel in long practice gestures. No drama, no hurry, just the quiet excellence of people who do a thing because it needs doing. As the sun sets, you help stack the cleaned fish for drying. You wrap your hands in cloth to ward off the salt sting and work alongside them until the last mackerel is hung. Then someone pours a small cup of warmed honey wine and hands it to the gray-haired woman. She raises it. To the sea, she says. To the fish. To us. You clink cups, you drink. You smile, because today you learned something that no saga ever says out loud. The best fisher in the village never raised a sword. She raised a net. And it was enough. The next morning arrives with frost on the boat rails and mist curling low across the fjord. You pull your cloak tighter as you head toward the shoreline, not yet sure what the day holds until you spot a row of villagers standing silently in front of the drying racks, each holding something small and strange. A fishbone, a carved shell, a smooth bit of antler etched with spirals. Eric steps up beside you, chewing on a sliver of dried cod. Talisman day, he mumbles. Time to remind the sea we're still polite. You nod as if you understand, then whisper, reminded of what? He smiles, that we're not trying to take more than our share. And so begins a day of luck charms, fish gods, and quiet rituals. You're handed a bit of driftwood, dark and knotty, with a hole bored through the top. Make it yours, someone says. You sit by the fire, rubbing the surface smooth with a shard of sandstone, then scratch a few marks into it, lines that resemble waves, maybe, or a net. It doesn't matter. It's yours now. The others do the same. Each charm is different. Some are elaborate, carved with tiny runes painted with plant dye tied with red or blue string. Others are plain, worn smooth by fingers over generations. There's a boy holding a necklace of herringbones. A girl carries a pouch of shells she insists only work when buried near the waterline. An elder carries a tiny fish skull dipped in pitch, hung from a strand of her own hair. Historians argue about Viking spirituality. How much was God's? How much was nature? How much was practical superstition? But here, in the salty silence of a fishing village, belief lives in the hands. In rituals passed quietly between tide and trade. You help tie your talisman onto a piece of netting draped between two poles. Others do the same, creating a long, fluttering line of offerings. Some will stay here. Others will be taken to the boats, lashed to masts, or tucked into oarlocks. A few are left near the water, just beyond the high tide mark. To feed the sea spirits, someone whispers. You help hang them carefully, watching the line dance in the wind. It's not about fear, it's about respect. The sea gives, yes, but it also takes. After lunch, you're invited to join a quiet ritual down at the tide pool. A bowl of fish oil and dried herbs is set alight, sending up thin blue smoke that smells oddly pleasant, sharp clean, like a forgotten forest. A woman chants softly words that don't quite match any language you've heard. You ask what it means. It's not about the words she replies. It's about the listening. She takes your hand and dips your fingers in the smoke. Good luck, just in case she says. Later, you and Eric walk the beach, searching for flat stones, smooth ones palm-sized. You each carve a symbol onto yours. His is an anchor, yours, a crude fish. You swap them without comment and toss them into the waves. Eric raises an eyebrow. Now it owes you. You don't ask what. You just smile. As the sun dips lower, you return to the racks where the fish sway gently beside the string of talismans. Someone has added feathers. Another, a bundle of rosemary. Someone else, a clay bead with a smiling face scratched in. You laugh. Quietly, it still counts. The fire is lit early tonight. Not for warmth, but for light. One by one, the villagers sit and show their charms, sharing the stories behind them. A fish carved by a father, a hook swallowed and retrieved, a stone found inside the belly of a cod, still warm from the gut. You show your driftwood piece. It gets a nod. That's all it needs. You sleep that night with your charm tied to the bedpost. Outside, the wind rustles the strings of fish and feathers. The sea licks the shore, gentle, now content with its gifts. In the dark, you understand something new. Fishing isn't just work. It's a conversation, one where silence, gestures, and strange little offerings carry more weight than any prayer. The morning air is colder than it's been all week. You step outside and notice it immediately, not in the sky or the wind, but in the racks. They're empty. Not completely, but enough to make your stomach twitch. Where there were once rows of drying fish swaying lazily in the sea breeze, now there's only the odd tail, a few stubborn bones, and far too much open space. Eric stands beside one of the rack's arms, scowling like someone stole his boots. You don't have to ask. The fish are gone. Not stolen, not eaten, just not biting, not swimming where they should, not coming home. And when you're in a Viking fishing village that runs on cod and rhythm, an empty rack isn't just unsettling, it's ominous. A low murmur spreads through the village. Nets are inspected, lines are tested, barrels are checked. No one says cursed, but you can hear it hiding behind everyone's silence. Eric finally speaks. We go farther today. You nod, knowing what that means: deeper waters, longer row, and colder hands. You push off with a team just after sunrise. The fjord is still unnervingly so. No gulls, no seal sightings, just the ripple of your oars, slicing water like old thread. Out past the rocks, you drop the nets. You wait and wait. Nothing. No tug, no ripple, not even a nibble of false hope. You try a second spot, then a third, then one so far from shore that even the village rooftops vanish behind the mist. Still nothing. Thord spits over the side of the boat and mutters something in a dialect you don't recognize. You assume it's not a compliment. Historians believe Viking fishermen faced seasonal shortages when fish migrated elsewhere, when spawning patterns changed, or when storms churned the water so badly that the cod went silent for weeks. But standing in a boat with empty nets and sore hands, you realize it's not just about the food. It's about the uncertainty. By midday, you return to shore with little more than stiff arms and quiet. The mood is different now. No jokes, no tall tales, just tension. Even the kids are subdued, poking half-heartedly at a leftover fish head with a stick. One asks, "Are they hiding?" No one answers. You help pack the empty barrels anyway, ritual if not necessity. Someone proposes searching the river mouth. Another suggests checking the shallows at night. Eric rubs his jaw and mutters, "We've seen this before. They'll come back." But even he doesn't sound convinced. You spend the afternoon weaving spare netting. It's meditative, even calming, until you realize no one's talking. Not even the gulls are yelling today. Dinner is lean stewed root vegetables with a single sliver of salted herring per bowl. Everyone pretends it's enough. No one finishes with a satisfied sigh. Afterward, you walk down to the racks again, hoping to find a fish. You missed a rack you forgot. Still mostly bare. You sit on a rock and watch the moon rise over the fjord. It's big tonight, full and heavy, casting silver across the water like a veil. You try to take comfort in it. Then you hear it. A splash. You lean forward, eyes wide. Another splash. Movement just offshore. You hold your breath. Then, nothing. Just the wind again. You stand and wait another minute, two, but the sea stays still. Later you tell Eric about it. He raises one eyebrow. Could be the fish coming back. Could be the fjord playing games. Or both. You lie down that night in your bedroll, hunger dull but manageable. The fish are out there somewhere. You whisper to your fishbone charm anyway, just in case. You wake to the sound of oars hitting water and voices rising in song, not loud or jubilant, but steady, rhythmic, familiar. You step outside into the half-light of dawn and see them. The longboats are back. Not the small fishing craft this time, the longships. Sleek, carved prow tipped with dragons and beasts' sails still furled their crews, returning from raid or trade or both. And just like that, the quiet of the fishing village vanishes. Children run toward the shore, shouting names. Dogs bark. Elders raise their hands, but don't wave, waiting, measuring. The boats crunch gently onto the beach, and out step warriors, some grinning, some limping, some carrying sacks of goods, others carrying nothing at all. You watch from the racks, uncertain whether to feel relief or apprehension. Then Eric slaps your shoulder, back just in time for the last catch. You blink. What do you mean? He gestures toward the bay. You'll see. The raiders' return doesn't push the fishermen aside, it summons them. By mid-morning, it's clear the final catch of the season is not a routine affair. It's ceremony, symbolic, a closing note. You're invited to help prepare the boats. This time, both warriors and fishers work side by side, mending lines, sharpening knives, checking barrels. The mood is lighter now, half reverent, half competitive. You set out on the water with a new crew, half with calloused hands from rowing, the other half with sword scars and fresh tattoos. They talk of distant markets, near misses with storms, and a place where the fish shine like coins. You listen. You row. You reach the deeper part of the bay, and the net is cast one last time. You wait. Then movement. Tug. The net lifts heavy and full. Cod, herring, mackerel. As if the sea had waited for this moment. The boat rocks under the weight. Everyone cheers in their own way. Back on shore, the catch is met with celebration. Fires are lit. Fish are cleaned on the beach right beside piles of gear from distant raids. Someone opens a barrel of spiced ale brought back from abroad. You're handed a cup. You drink. Later, the cooking begins, not just stew this time, but feast food. Fish roasted on spits, grilled flatbread with herbs, smoked meat brought home from across the sea. Someone finds a jar of honey and drizzles it over everything. One of the warriors sits beside you and tears a strip of fish with his teeth. Better than dried bread, he says. You nod. Then stories. The raiders speak of storms and narrow escapes, of foreign rulers who wear gold in their beards, of coins that don't clink, and cities where no one eats fish. The fishers answer with tales of whales, ghost nets, and eels that refuse to die, even when salted. You watch the sun drop behind the hills, casting orange light across the fjord. Someone brings out a drum, someone else a flute carved from bone. The music begins slow, steady, wrapping around the firelight and smoke. You sit with your bowl full, now the fish perfectly cooked. The air smells like brine and ash, honey and salt. You feel it settle in your bones. This day is not just about the catch. It's about coming back. About finishing the season with hands full, bellies warm, and stories shared. As night deepens, the longships are pulled higher onto the shore and covered for the winter. The fish are strung, salted, and stored. Nets are coiled tight. The boats are quiet. You walk once more down to the racks, full, now swaying gently in the breeze. The sea, too, seems still content for the moment. You sit with Eric on a low bench. Good catch, he says. You nod. You ready for winter? You think for a moment, then say almost. He nods again. That's as ready as anyone gets. You both fall quiet. Tomorrow will be colder. The work will change. But for now, there's warmth in the coal's fullness in your belly, and fish still smoking on the rack. The last catch came just in time. You wake slowly on your final morning in the village. The cold is sharper today, not biting, but certain, the way it gets when the season is turning. You sit up beneath your fur blanket and notice the silence. No gulls, no waves slapping the shore, no scraping of boats. Just the crackle of an early fire and the soft creak of wood as someone moves quietly through the longhouse. Outside, mist blankets the fjord like a closing curtain. The boats are still. The racks stand quiet, their fish wrapped and stored. The bustle of the last few days has faded, leaving behind something softer. You step outside and breathe deeply. Smoke, salt, frost, and peace. Today you're not fishing, you're watching. Most of the villagers are gathered near the shore, standing in loose clusters wrapped in cloaks and hoods. No one shouts. No one hurries. This morning is for pause. You ask Eric what's happening. He just nods toward a small group gathered at the water's edge. A long, narrow boat rests there, not for sailing, not for working, for honoring. A fisherman passed in the night-old respected quiet. One of those people who always seemed to be part of the landscape. You didn't speak with him much, but you remember his smile, his stories, the way he could gut a fish with his eyes closed. They're sending him off the way he would have wanted, with fish salt smoke and stillness. You help carry a wrapped bundle of dried cod to the boat. Others bring herbs, a carved paddle, and a small clay jar of fish paste that makes one of the children wrinkle their nose. He loved that stuff, someone whispers. The boat is pushed gently into the water. No flames, no spectacle, just quiet hands, steady hearts, and a low chant that hums like a lullaby. The mist folds around the craft as it drifts slowly into the fjord, the current carrying it forward until it vanishes into the gray. You feel something settle in your chest, something heavy but not painful, like a net being lowered slowly to rest. Later, the village gathers for stew. Of course it's fish, but it's made carefully with all the best scraps seasoned just right. You eat in silence, letting the warmth fill you from the inside. After the meal, someone presses a gift into your hand, a carved fishbone charm shaped like a hook, smoothed by thumb and time. You've earned it, they say. You tie it to your wrist. Then the time comes to leave. You walk the shore one last time, boots brushing kelp and shell. You touch the boats, the racks, the ropes you helped braid. You stop at the spot where you first tried casting a net and failed spectacularly. You smile. At the edge of the fjord, you turn back. The village is quiet again. The fire smoke rises thin and white. The sea is calm. No fanfare, no ceremony, just a slow exhale. A nod, a goodbye. You step into your boat, one you now row by instinct. The oars bite the water cleanly. The mist parts ahead of you, revealing nothing and everything. And you row. The fish will return again when they're ready. The nets will hang and wait. And somewhere on a quiet beach, someone will tell a story of a stranger who came, fished, listened, and left smelling like smoke and cod forever. You smile. Because you were that stranger, and now you're something more. You lie back in your cot, the imagined boat still rocking gently beneath you. The sound of waves brushing the shore has settled into your breath. Your hands still ghosted with salt, and sun rests calmly on your chest. The fire crackles softly in your memory, low, steady, the way it always sounded after a long day by the racks. The scent of smoked fish, pine needles, and cold sea air lingers at the edge of your imagination, like a dream you're just barely holding on to. Somewhere out on the fjord, the mist has rolled back. The tide is low, and the boats, their nets carefully hung, are asleep too. You remember the rhythm of rowing, slow, steady, like a heartbeat. The weight of a good catch. The laughter of someone handing you broth that smelled like boiled ocean. And the silence of a village that listened more than it spoke. Now let it fade. Let the wind die down. Let the gulls nestle into the cliffs, and the fire soften to embers. You've fished. You've worked. You've waited, watched, and learned. You've listened to the sea, and it listened back. So now close your eyes. Let the net rest. Let the water hold you. Let the story drift into stillness. Sleep well, fisher. The sea will still be here tomorrow.